Well, this was supposed to be Judgment Day for the Andrews government today over its appalling mismanagement of hotel quarantine. The findings of the Coate Board of Inquiry were handed down this morning, and some might describe it as a total fizzer. This $10 million investigation could not find anyone or any agency responsible for choosing security guards to run the quarantine program. It did find, however, that 99% of the state's second wave came from the virus being spread from hotels used for quarantine. The Premier responded with this apology.
I want to apologise to the Victorian community for the very clear errors that were made in this program. I think that the way in which the program was established, it had to be done quickly. That's the nature of a global pandemic. There is no rule book as such. I think decisions about who worked in the program is less an issue. It is more a matter, and the report finds this, the lack of that very detailed oversight.
And then he made a special point of apologising to the families of those who lost loved ones because of the series of bungles and will be without them at Christmas time.
If we had our time again, we would go back and we would make sure that that oversight, that vigilance, that sense of real-time monitoring of problems was a feature of the scheme that was set up all those months ago. We can't do that. We can only learn those lessons, offer our sympathies and condolence to everyone. This will be an incredibly difficult week. There will be people missing from the Christmas dinner table on Friday, and I am deeply sorry and saddened by that.
My colleague here at Sky News, Peta Credlin, has done an enormous job forensically analysing the evidence given to the inquiry, and I caught up with Peta earlier to gauge her reaction. Peta Credlin, what a monumental waste of time and money, and how awful for the victims' families too.
I tell you what, Chris, it's so close to Christmas, isn't it? And they were hoping against hope that the Coate report would give them some answers. I mean, there is one thing the report makes clear for all the boosters of Daniel Andrews out there is that 99% of Victoria's second wave came from hotel quarantine, and it came from hotel quarantine failures. But this idea, you know, you spend $10 million in this inquiry, the processor, she crows Jennifer Coate about the 70,000 documents that they had before them. I don't know that any of them are read, and they certainly didn't call the right people because they weren't asking the right questions to find where we are today, that nobody really knew, that it all happened by osmosis, that Victoria got itself into trouble through, you know, bad governance and officials and MPs, ministers making the wrong call, but no one's fessing up to it. And the inquiry chair today just throws her hands up in the air and says, well, it's terrible, but I can't tell you who's to blame.
Yeah, it has resulted in a farce. The findings are a farce. And in particular, the closest we got to the $64 million question about who was responsible for assigning the job of hotel quarantine to security guards was that the police chief was somehow in favour of that view, and that's the closest we got.
She does point the time frame to be this meeting of the State Control Centre around 4:30 p.m. on the Friday the 27th of March. But I just don't think that holds water, because let's go back from there. You have a national cabinet decision that says it'll be ADF and it'll be police, which every other state in the Commonwealth did. Victoria didn't. It goes it alone. We know that there was that interchange of text messages between the police chief in Victoria and the AFP chief in Canberra at about 1:30 that says, don't want it to be us, we want to babysit. And the other guy saying, well, no, it's all okay, we've got a special deal with the Premier's office. There's a meeting at 2 o'clock with the police ministers there, the police chief, the Emergency Management Commissioner, talking about private security. We know the Premier does a press conference. He himself talks about private security, but we're all told that no decision was made. Now, Daniel Andrews is many things, but he's no one's patsy. He would not have gone out there, announced a decision that was radically different than the National Cabinet unanimous decision, which finished at 1 o'clock. He wouldn't announce something at 3:30 that he didn't agree with, or that was an overturning of a decision he'd been in a room when it was made 2 hours earlier. I just don't buy that. Yeah. This is all about no one in government wanting to take responsibility, lest they lose their job, lest they fall foul of Victoria's industrial manslaughter laws. And there was this, cheap apology from the Premier today. People have waited months and months and months to hear government take responsibility. Today he tried that with the report, but I don't know anyone who lost someone this year buys it.
No. Does his apology, and he apologised a couple of times in that press conference, does that open the possibility for some kind of, class action from the families of the victims, do you think?
Well, I think that's already open, Chris. There's a number of class actions before the court for a range of different things. I suspect there will be a lot more. I think that people, certainly my sense of Victorians at the moment, we're limping towards Christmas. We want to put this terrible year behind us. We have great sympathy for those in the northern beaches and everything that's going on in and around Sydney at the moment. But we want to put this year behind us. We want to try and move on and rebuild. I don't think people want to relitigate the past in terms of, public commentary and things like that. But make no mistake, they know what caused the second wave in Victoria. Coate makes that genomic link today in her report. And I think there is still a lot of anger towards the government. But interestingly, I have to say, if Daniel Andrews went to a poll tomorrow, he would probably win quite comfortably. Yeah, hands down. I just find it amazing. Forget about the fact that it's got something to do with a major emergency in the state and a pandemic, but as a project, the lack of oversight from the Premier, for one, from the Health Minister, for two, and then the Chief Health Officer was just staggering. I find it really extraordinary because I've been on the other side when we've done big things like, we sent troops over to fight against Islamic State. We dealt with the coming down of MH17 and obviously Operation Sovereign Borders, all of those in their own way as complex and as unpredictable and unforeseen as what happened in Victoria. But I know how government has sort of templates behind the scenes to ensure that the left hand's talking to the right hand. Well, clearly those templates weren't in place in the Victorian government context. But it's more than that. Like, it's more than just hapless. I think some of the behaviour is close to criminal. I think some of the behaviour in relation to the letting of contracts should be before a special investigator, Chris. Coate makes it clear that there were entities, there were security companies that got these $30 million plus contracts that had been rejected, not just not on the preferred contract list, but had been rejected when they applied to be on that list. So there's sort of some level of concern about how those contracts were let. Now, on this very question today, the Premier was asked in his press conference, do you still have confidence in this minister in terms of jobs, Martin Pakula, or the head of Martin Pakula's department, a guy called Simon Phimister? The Premier backed them in. Yeah. And he backed these individuals in. Victorian taxpayers have got to ask, why were they given these contracts in a matter of hours? Where was the due diligence? It went against all the established procurement rules and processes. And again, that's not in here in any great detail in the Coate report. And most importantly, I have to say, listening to the Premier today, giving a bit of a side swipe to the PM for not giving him the full complement of ADF to mind the borders in Victoria now that they're shut to New South Wales. The PM obviously is worried about cyclones and all the other usual things that happen around Christmas, so he's keeping troops deployed right around the country. This is a Premier who had 850 troops coming to Victoria in June, and within 12 hours of the troops being on their way, knocked them back. Well, Coate doesn't tell us why. We don't get a proper answer. No. And we know at the time there were only 20 dead in Victoria. If those troops had come at the back end of June, we might be in a very, very different situation than we are now, with over 800 dead in the state. Yeah, not to mention the impact that's had on the whole economy, Australia's economy. Well, back to the drawing board. Peta Credlin, thank you very much, and all the best for Christmas too, by the way. You too, Chris, and all the best to our wonderful viewers here on Sky 2.